Hello, everyone. We're still letting a few people in. As soon as we get a few more in, we can start. Um, for those who don't already know me, I'm Scott Tipps. I'm the president of the National Health Federation, your host for this event, NHF, that is. Your kind of co-hosts are Charles Frohman, our NHF lobbyist in Washington, and myself. Uh, so what I wanted to do, maybe I'll just go ahead and start because there's a lot of ground to cover today. Here comes one of our board members.
And I can
Um,
let folks in, Scott, while you talk.
yeah, that's what I'm doing.
I mean, I can
Uh,
let folks in while you talk.
oh, it doesn't matter. I can do it while it's like nothing. But in any event, one of the things that NHF does is it spends a lot of time globally on the Codex Alimentarius meetings. We also deal with things domestically, nationally, of course, but one of the main things that we're known for is our participation, active, even aggressive participation at Codex Alimentarius meetings uh, around the world. There's the Codex Alimentarius Commission, and then it has its sub-bodies, the committees, and the committees in turn have the grandkids, which are known as electronic working groups. And these are the ones that are setting food standards that will replace and supplant food standards and rules and regulations domestically in pretty much every country around the world. Codex covers 99.9% of the world's population. So it's really important. And we, National Health Federation, we're the only health freedom organization credited by Codex, which means we're able to participate in the meetings actively. We're able to speak out, submit written documents, interact with other delegates in real time. And so at these meetings, let me see if I can find the screen. I just wanted to show you real quickly. I think this is it. Um, at the end of each meeting, they produce a report, and the report is pretty dry. I mean, dusty dry, and kind of hard to decipher for anyone who's not used to Codex meetings because it's sort of like chasing down a rabbit hole, and they don't like to name the delegations if they can avoid it. And the only time they really do is if a delegation has a reservation to a particular food standard or guideline. So at this meeting that I just came back from in Rome, Italy, it was a week-long meeting in Rome. Sounds great, right? A week in Rome. Well, you don't see much of the city during the meeting, and afterwards you're kind of too tired to go around and see the sights. But in any event, I've been there plenty of times, so it didn't matter. But we were NHF, that is, were one of the most aggressive groups at this meeting, and they produce this report at the end of the times, at the end of the week. And so, like I said, they don't like to name the organizations like NHF or the Monsanto Front Group, which is called, uh, charmingly enough, Crop Life. They always give these names that are like that. Uh, so anyway, you have a chance to correct the report. You have a chance to go in and if you look at paragraph 60, that was their bare bones comment about my much longer intervention where I spoke out against the new pesticides they were trying to approve worldwide. And the funny thing is, we were supporting the European Union, which has similar position to ours, and the European Union had tried to change the report so it would read more about what they were, the reasons behind why they were opposing. And the Codex Secretariat at the head table said, no, you can't do that because you submitted a conference room document. You'll see in paragraph 60, it says CRD 08, and right there at the end. And they said, because you did that, we aren't going to put it in the report. And then I had already flagged up, as they call it, to speak out because I wanted more said about what we had talked about. And then I asked that some words be added that provided further comments on the dangers of pesticides and their persistence in the environment. I just wanted those words added in. And they had just refused similar wording to the EU. And with me, they said, no problem. And they put it in, which was like incredible. And because if they usually refuse a country, they'll refuse an INGO, an international non-governmental organization. They call us observers, but we're really delegates because we get to intervene, we get to talk out, we get to submit papers, all of that. It's much more than just observing. So it's kind of a minimizing name to call us that. Anyway, we were mentioned in other parts of the report. But the gist of it is the pesticides did advance up the 8-step ladder, so that now they're at step 5. And the funny thing is, at this meeting, there were so many people who came up to me and said, "You're famous." I go, "What?" Because I would like introduce myself. They say, "Oh, we know your name already." So the funny thing about NHF is through its 28-year-long participation at Codex Alimentarius, there isn't a single country in the world, except maybe the People's Democratic Republic of Korea, North Korea, that doesn't know our name and what we stand for. And they all respect us. In fact, when I got that language inserted in the report, the chairman asked the rest of the commission members, are there any objections? And all it would have taken is for one country to have objected and my wording would have been removed. No one said a word. And we sat there, my fingers crossed for 30 seconds. And then the chairman said, okay, it's in the report. And it's important because the CRD, which we submitted, was 27 pages of arguments against pesticides, 27 pages. And of course, in the Codex record, it's reduced down, cut in half because they lowered the type font size and all of that. But anyway, we actually are being heard and we are making a difference in many ways. So I just wanted to share that with you while it was fresh in my mind. And with that, I'll turn it over to our NHF lobbyist, Charles Froman, who has some things to share with you as well. And then he'll do the introductions for our speaker, our guest speaker today, David Byrd. Thank you, Charles.
Thank you, Scott. And I got one follow-up I think you'll like for you to answer. And that is in the invitation for today that you're seeing on your screen, when you go down to Agenda 2, which is geoengineering, I highlight our submission to HHS to influence RFK's recommendations from his MAHA investigation on reversing chronic disease. And I highlight, of course, our paragraph to defund and end this atmospheric pollution that David Byrd will discuss. In that submission that you guys can click, it's in chat, and click the red word wrote. One of our final recommendations is to upgrade our representation for the U.S. delegation at Codex. So tell me, Scott, how has this Trump-Maha dynamic influenced the behavior of the American delegation at Codex?
Thank you, Charles, for reminding me of that. I completely had forgotten to mention that. So leave it to you to pick apart the unsaid, unspoken piece. Well, here's the funny thing. Before the meeting started in Rome on Monday, the 10th of November, I went up to the American delegate, head of delegation, Ken, And I've known Ken for probably 10, 15 years, and he was just sort of a sidekick to the main heads of delegation for the U.S. Codex delegation. But now he's the head. So I went up to him, I said, on this pesticide thing, I hope you'll support the European Union's position and the NHF's position. And he said, "Oh, Scott, I'm sorry, I can't do that." I said, "Why not? At least sit on your hands and don't say a word against it, if you would, against our position, if you would." He said, "I can't do that either." And I said, "Why not?" "Well, I've got instructions from above, and I've got to adhere to them." So there's no MAHA penetration into the Codex meeting whatsoever, and it needs to be addressed. And hopefully Charles and his multitude of contacts can help amend that and fix that, because otherwise we still have an enemy in the U.S. delegation at our Codex meetings. An opponent, let me say, maybe not an enemy, but definitely an opponent. Thank
I
you,
hope I didn't
Charles, for that.
hope I didn't set myself up for an impossible task lobbying wise.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's through allies that we can get what we want directly. And to that extent, Scott has attended one, I've attended two conferences put on by this Patient First Coalition, whose link I have right here in Agenda 1. And they're not the only conference or allies that can help us indirectly, but we do have a lot of friends there. And whether it's with Patient First or any other group, you can help NHF by connecting us to other groups. And I'll just let me stop share and restart this time, David, with sound, because I did get covered at one of these conferences, and I have a short blurb to share with you. Um, Let me just hide the floating meeting control so we can see the tabs. That's the one problem with Zoom. So there was a documentarian at both of these meetings, and let's see here. Here is him covering my talk, at least a second of it, on what has become a priority for NHF. And it's in the invitation where we really pressured Kennedy to include something on the wireless mesh in his MAHA recommendations. Um, and it's really a priority for us because we keep losing. The pandemic allowed us to push back on vaccine tyranny, but there hasn't been a similar catastrophe to make enough politicians care enough about the deployment of these antennas outside our bedrooms and kids' classrooms. And we just lost this week in the Energy and Commerce Subcommittee on Communications with the big bill that everyone hated from the last Congress that would get rid of even more powers from your local officials to zone these towers safely away. So this is a theme that you'll hear a lot about on these monthly Zooms.
I am Chair and General Counsel of the National Call for Safe Technology. I am also a technology transactional attorney and have been that for over 20 years. I also am the Executive Director of the New York City Alliance for Safe Technology, and I'm President and General Counsel of Wired Broadband, Inc., located in New York City. And it's all about informing people about the hazards of wireless radiation and what we can do about that. 5G is bringing the towers very close and right outside your window. No one's talking about the hazards of wireless radiation.
Wireless has run amok, and not really on the slide, but I like to characterize the dynamic of the telecom assault as pretty much the exact same as the assault from pharma. No informed consent, smothering of the science, and utter capture of the regulatory process.
It's not just an inconvenience that we have all these cell towers that are ugly and a blight on society. It's not an inconvenience that we have wind farms and solar farms popping up everywhere. It's actually an existential threat. It's a crisis that is harming people, it's killing people.
There are
So, anyways, just your NHF in action around the country and the world, whether at Codex or at conferences. The word is getting out, but if you do want to help us schedule meetings with your politicians, um, we are trying to get more meetings to educate congressional staffers on this threat. And I did have a blurb here about the more recent meeting at Cleveland, where I exhibited for NHF and spoke a couple times on MAHA and other issues. So back to today's topic, you see in the invitation the background of our speaker. He has a background in aerospace with Boeing and Pro Air, and he wanted to know why the skies were becoming so dim and the weather so aberrant. So he researched it, and he thinks it's bad news, as previous speakers have felt as well. So, Mr. Byrd, with that, tell us why we should care so much about geoengineering and weather modification and what we can do about it.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. You must be the busiest person alive, as evidenced by everywhere I see you, and I'm most appreciative to Scott Tips and your entire crew for inviting me once more. This is my third presentation. So why we should care is that somehow we faced a point in society, even about 9/11 time, for me, I'm in the X generation. I don't know how it was for you, where we just stopped caring. We got really busy, we got broke. And then this capture that you mentioned started becoming more pervasive, but I think still the average person, they might hear that as a moniker, and that is a moniker of either distaste or, they choose apathy on that. So we're in a crisis, in my opinion. What Dale Miner in his book, Information War, it's just an information war. We are not aware of the things that are true that will empower us to empower legislators to represent us, if that's a clear enough statement. So we should care about this because it affects our health. I've never heard of the NHF before last year, never heard of Jim Lee before last year, and I'm a researcher. I'm an editor, right? So I'm in the pole position for incumbency to know about this, yet I don't. So I think that's our crisis, is we're not united. We don't, everything is money driven always, right? And so those factors have sent us into this zone Naomi Klein calls the shock doctrine. We're just always busy with something else, but keying into our intuition, our God-given, hey, what's going on? I'm smelling the flowers, as it were. And obviously, when you look up, that's a problem. Obviously, especially for this generation that I'm seeing. I mean, there's no, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't remember growing up in Paradise, California, and ever seeing a persistent contrail. I saw the SR-71 a couple times. I saw rockets. I saw flares. So that's the problem. We should care about this because we don't care. Okay. So I started caring when I moved from Hawaii, where I've never even heard of a persistent contrail ever, because half the island's always cloud covered. And then moved to Boulder, and then the weather was weird there. And they have two antennae there that are Department of Commerce, which I looked at on a bike one day, and I thought that was bizarre. Department of Commerce, that makes no sense. So later on, I would learn about the reorganization of government and all that. But the weather was just weird. Colorado was weird anyway. You have severe temperature changes, but you don't have these lines in the sky, the scalar waves, these storms that just defy anything I had ever seen. And I've been to 48 states. I lived in Kauai for a while. Went to a hurricane there in '92. I've lived through Thailand 4 times, Korea once, Japan, and so forth. And so I've seen a lot of different weather, England, and you kind of throw it all in your mix and you go, this violates everything that I know about air travel and skies that I'm familiar with. And that isn't resonating with people. Even when a movie like, Look Up comes out, they don't see the allegory. They're just, oh, that's such a good movie. I love Leonardo DiCaprio. He's my fave. So that's why we should care, is that people are in that box. And so we have to find, in my opinion, a way to cut through that with science and without anger and so on. So that's what I'm aiming to do. And while I was out here where I am in Turkey, I'm looking up, I'm going, okay, well, how do I find a way to know whether that's dangerous or not? And then it took 2 years, but I've learned about the flight trackers. I learned about the University of Wyoming weather radio sondes that come out. I learned about MODIS. I learned about satellites. I'd finally learned about Jim Lee's work and so many of the other activists that are far more credible than their counterparts, you know, that I was introduced to. I got sick in 2016. I was on the couch healing, and I watched, you know, 300 or 400 documentaries on this, that, and the other. Of course, one of them was chemtrails. And the way they present it, it's always, you know, flashbang, Bush is terrible, you know, Clinton's part of the Masons, whatever. It's just very, it's very lambasting. You know what I mean? And so I'm like, I don't resonate with that. I'm an airline employee. You know, we're very serious people, you know, and I'm like, I know my mother, I know my church, I know my locale will resonate more with something that is well presented and more calm. And so I've labored to produce that. And Jim Lee, actually, after I came up with this, 2 or 3 months later, he featured a similar algorithm that I came up with, our methodology, on his show with Reinette Steinem. And I have to say, according to what he's saying, it's like, what I'm trying to tell the world is everybody's right, okay? Everybody. There is a conspiracy, but it's not good to say it that way. Let's just say there's a breakdown of government, right? That's a safe way to say it. You can't say chemtrails, as Rosalind Peterson pointed out. There are carbonaceous burn-offs to too high a degree, you know, and we should get soil samples out there. We should test for them as part of our government oversight, right? That's a hell of a lot safer way to say that. And so that's what I'm trying to advocate. Now I better get going here. So we debate, gossip, theorize all we want, but no court or official government will accept the claim without evidence. So I'm trying to show people how to find that evidence. The argument that we hear on media and government is that traffic has quadrupled since the 60s. Yes, it has, but it only doubled from 1997 to 2007. So if 40 planes blighted your sky in 2007, then only 20 should have done so in 1997. That's not what the skies look like.
Excuse me, David, do you want to be sharing your screen or not?
I'm just reading, and I'll start here in a minute, and I'm almost done. Still, debunkers gaslight with a "you never noticed before" argument. You know, they have books and productions saying, here's a contrail, they've been extant forever, and they're right? But those are contrails, and that's what the government media is telling you. Contrails are harmless, and I don't think they're harmless, but they're a hell of a lot more harmless than coal fly ash and what's actually, you know, the barium and the aluminum, strontium, magnesium, copper, and all the things we're finding all over the world. Okay, so I think that's the problem. If we need to arm ourselves with, oh, yeah, I know about that, I know about that, I know about that, and I know how to look at the sky. I have my flight tracker, I have my humidity data, and I know that it's not humid up in that sky. So aloha, right? That's what I'm trying to share. And I figured that out. It took a long, long time. All right, so let me go ahead and start. Here, desktop. This front picture that you're going to see was taken at Amasra. It's a huge annel on the north part of Turkey that goes to the Soviet Union and Europe and whatever. So here we go. All right, so these are the issues: privacy and cell infrastructure that you mentioned, the weird rainbows that you're going to see, and what may or may not chemtrails. Some are just contrails, and that's what I'm trying to share. Okay, so everybody, I'm pretty sure everybody on this call is familiar with the electromagnetic spectrum. There are experts here. Here's frequency is just a beat: 1 second, 2 second, 3 second, and you add the dangerous range in cell phones is 600 to 800, if I remember. And it just so happens to be Verizon. They occupy the premium band of harm, you know, just by coincidence. In '96, I worked on the very first digital cell phone infrastructure on Kauai. There was 2 in the world. There was Israel and there was Kauai, and I was on Kauai working on that. Not for them. It was touch-tone technology. Anyway, so the dangerous stuff is over here. X-rays, we all know about that. It took 50 years to figure out that X-rays were dangerous. Cosmic rays are dangerous, and some people think we're shielding, these chemtrails are shielding us from these cosmic and other, the Van Allen belt and so on. That came up in one of the call. And so there might be a good reason to do what we're doing, the geoengineering. And I'm sorry, I disagree. Anyway, so this is the problem. We're rolling out EMF related stuff at a huge rate. Arthur Furstenberg says these satellites are coming down on Guffey, Colorado, and I've been there. He talks about an animal shelter where the fur is melting off their bodies. And in 10 days to 2 weeks, if he had not taken his animals out of his shelter, and he's an expert vet, they would all die. That's a pretty good case study, right? That's a pretty good one. Then you get 60 megahertz. This is where all the testing is done. This is where our underground and overground power utility grid is set up. Coincidentally, this is also the ground wave emergency network. I think it's 65. So it's every time we use that just to test it, or the NextRad or whatever, I'm pretty sure that's the VLF, and there's an expert here, so he can clarify that. But this is where we're at. This is the danger. Okay, so the reason why nobody will listen to the studies is all the regulatory testing was done here, and the actual harm is here, right? No brainer. All right, here we go. Can waves move matter? Yeah. Okay, that's cymatics. We're all familiar with that. The higher the tone, the more complex the pattern. And Lee Montagnier was working on that. Masaru Emoto, all these guys. There's a movie, Kymatica. You can see that, but it gets pretty trippy. This is not a new concept. This book here was written in 1929, and he says, as one sound is directed by another sound, so every motion is caused by another motion. Therefore, no activity can take place without a directing activity, and that directing activity is called God. Boom, right? The Upanishads say the same thing. The Bible said the same thing. In the beginning, there was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So if you interpret this, even as far back as that time, this was understood that sound creates movement on matter. And this is the premise behind all the scientific study that we're trying to get people to understand. Therefore, I figured if people can actually see these waves or see the effect of them, like lycopodium iron filings, it'll be more efficacious. This is important. The piezo or piezoelectric effects on human effects, Robert O. Becker. The reason why that's important is because barium is also piezoelectric. And that is purportedly the way we steer clouds. We introduce electrical current in media there in the clouds, and people are like, you can't steer clouds. That's impossible. You have these high winds. Oh, yes, you can. Oh, yes, you can. So that's Robert Becker was working with medicine, and then there's a contrapuntal aspect in other areas. Everyone knows Masaru Emoto. Culpeper was an astrologer, and he ascribed even plants, even healing herbs, everything had an astrology and a sound to it. So it's basically in 1653, I believe, sound healing way back then. So this is old. This is old. Again, a crisis of awareness. Now, oops, excuse me. That's not what I wanted to do. So I found this from Berkeley. And like I said, if people could see at least a representation of what EMFs and RFs look like, they might take it a little more seriously. Okay? This doesn't last long. There we go. So that's what it would look like from a tower, a large building. And if people could see that coming at them, they'd be like, whoa. Okay. Move on. There's the infamous SAR test I'm sure everybody's familiar with. They fill this with glucose, and then they do their testing all over the head and later the body, Kyocera, all these, $1 million machines. Here's the cell phone left on an active continuous call. And this is, I believe, was a 2G or 1G. I think it's a 2G phone. So the least amount of harm, right? And we're testing with the least amount of harm, and that's our safety standard that is still in operation today, even after the FCC 2021 ruling, which I know you're all aware of. They have not complied with that I'm aware of. Anyway, we built this document for local, Doe Kelly and I got together, and she kept bugging me with emails saying, hey, this EMF this, EMF that, I'm electrosensitive, canary in a coal mine. I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? because I'm also EMF sensitive, but I didn't know it when we met. And so her email to me, our interchange became this document. Okay, and so let's see if I have one open here. It's not that one, it's the other one, so we won't worry about it. Anyway, pardon. There we go. So it features Arthur Furstenberg in a really good rare radio interview that he did in 2018. And he just he describes the mechanism really well. Here's how the smart meters don't feature. They don't even show them at the FCC. All of these scientists that I feature, is 4 of them, 3 from Harvard and Furstenberg. So you got Cornell, you got SUNY, Berkeley, and you've got 2 people from Harvard, and one of which was Norm Alster writing Captured Agency, and that's everywhere now. In the old days, DDT was good, and X-rays, we didn't know it would do stuff like this. We didn't know lead could kill babies like that. We made a game and a comic strip out of lead paint. So I'm pointing out the connection between technologies which were unsafe and the history of them. And curiously, all 3 of these went 50 years before they were yanked, right? And they had all their dirty tricks, just like they did in House Bill 3557 at the last minute. Just say, oh, here, by the way, here, read this, read this, read this. Those tricks were way back when. And there's a good article that shows that. Anyway, I got to move a little faster here. They weren't classified as possibly carcinogenic until 2001, 15 years after this test. Hardell's study in IRC was boxed out. So was Henry Lai before that, and so on. You know all this. That act shifted the regulation from EPA to FCC, excluding public oversight. And DDT X-rays, I just went over that. Warnings, Kane Aldkoffler, who wasn't an EMF proponent at all. He was working with tobacco. Deborah Davis featured him, and that's a great in to talk to people about, because he had no interest in EMF, yet they put him in Siberia, basically, in scientific Siberia, and he found, just as a hobby, he came up with EMF science that showed that it was harmful a long time ago. I think this was in the 70s. So 5G rollout occurred during COVID, despite the court judgment against the FCC we already mentioned. Okay, and of course, we all know about the 2000 peer-reviewed studies implicating wireless radiation in direct biological harm. Okay, I should mention the Italian Supreme Court ruling, right, which upheld that ruling twice, saying that that gentleman who was harmed by his cell phone, he deserves to win his case, and he did. So here's some good ends with people. Blumenthal, even though he's in kind of a tiff with Ron Johnson, he nails the 3 industry leaders that they called in this Senate Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee hearing way back when. And he gets it straight from these 3 giants. So they're just saying, no safety studies have been done. We've paid no money for independent research, right? And he's just like, oh, we're flying blind then. You've done nothing, really. That's a great source for people. Bert Wolf, everybody trusts him, especially in the silent generation. So if people are unfamiliar with this, they can go there. That's a great one. Deborah Davis, we all know about. She's kind of the king of this. Furstenberg, the late, I'm sorry to say, you can still get to his site with Archive. Okay, I suggest people know that. And then, of course, National Health Federation. You guys have 2 campaigns, which I'm sure we're all aware of here, which is excellent. This is a synopsis worth seeing. If you go down here, you get a bio on each one of them, and especially, let's see, War Game. War Game aside. Anyway, who was that? Was Lai. There we go. Safe Labs of the War Game, his science. Motorola wrote an internal memo that they would war game his science. Now, Robert Kane alluded to that too. Okay, so there's a lot of heavy hitters. Paul Moskowitz, like I mentioned, and some people I've never heard of. Anyway, that's a good one. This is the best movie I've seen on this subject. In addition to Beings of Frequency, this Digital Dilemma, it's a foreign film. It's excellent. It has current studies and current scientists, and they're different names. And so when we get sick of ourselves, right, it's just the broken. Yeah, you always talk about that guy. You always talk about the guy. Oh, yeah, how about this French girl? How about how about this Italian scientist? And they do excellent science there, in my opinion. But I'm not that much of a science. This is A Scene from Aerosol Crimes, 2005. And we don't have time, but that's Clifford Carnicom. In my opinion, that film is pretty much all you need, and the dimming. If you have those two films, you see an old example of what chemtrails were purported to be, what weather modification was purported to be, the biological operations, HARP is mentioned, the Gwen Towers. 2005, he compiled all of that accurately, perfectly, in my opinion, right? And now you got the dimming, and people don't quite trust Wigington because he has some inaccuracies, and he takes a very marketing edge, but it marries those claims up really well, in my opinion. So if there is anybody who's unfamiliar, pardon me, with what we're talking about, chemtrails, you know, like what are these supposed to be? That's what they are. But these, I believe, look more like persistent. I can't really tell because the sun's not hitting it right. No, it gets pretty dirty. It's pretty hazy. Yeah, there you go. So that's what people are upset about. Even if there's nothing toxic in here, you lose your vitamin D, you lose your crops, you lose your power from your off-grid living, and that's enough, right? That's enough. So that's the tack that Jim Lee is taking. He's trying to blame the airline industry. I wouldn't go that direction, but whatever. If it gets attention, if people start paying attention and getting educated, good deal. This is purported to be a static field generator. I don't have enough knowledge to know whether that's true. I took this one, and this is the only, whoops, I keep doing that. Pardon me. Where am I? Oh, forgive me, I hit a wall here. There we go. Now, for some reason, I can't get back in. But anyway, if you can still see this picture, this is 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, I know I filmed for 3 years straight. Okay, there are only 3 people that I know of that have done that, are Mark Stedham, a woman by the name of Madison Star Moon, and the meteorologist Scott Stevens. Now, I don't know any of these people, and I don't care. But I was looking at these documentaries. What are they doing? And so I was looking for unusual flight patterns, and this is one that I found. These 2 are regular flight paths. These 2 are not, and I memorized them. There's only 7. There's only 7 where I live, and these 2 don't belong there. So that's an example of something I'm like, hey, that you should watch out for. Now, I don't know why, but I can't advance out of here, so I'm going to go here. I made this sheet up for people. We don't need, but it depends on your perspective. According to officials, it's just harmless water vapor. Here's the EPA Air Force saying when it's humid and cold, they leave contrails. You get high enough, it's cold. Persistent contrails pose no direct threat to public health. Okay, but as Carnicom pointed out, they're sited in areas like New Mexico, Arizona, Colorado that at virtually any altitude do not have enough humidity, even with the newer engines, which came into service about 83. And what am I looking for? The high bypass. That's a huge argument right now. I'm like, it doesn't matter. It's too dry. You know, there's Air Force bases all over, and that's why people went up in arms. Will Thomas saw all the traffic up here in the border of Canada and Oregon and Washington. They were dumping lithium on the trail of our assassins. This is another great documentary of 2, one of which is a weather observer, a couple up there that are living there. Like, we've never seen this stuff. So my point here is this is a humid enough area to produce what scientists call persistent contrails, yet people that have lived there for 40 years have never seen them, right? All of a sudden they're seeing. Will Thomas picks up the story. Boom, chemtrails is born, right? They don't fall to the surface, they say. I'm like, yes, they don't if they're just water vapor. But if they're carrying soot, fly ash, or something else, you know, chemicals, I've seen this myself come down on a mall within 4 hours. So they're saying, oh, no, that can't happen. I'm like, no, it can't happen if it's just water vapor, right? And this is any 6th grader can tell you that this absolutely is part of the water cycle. You know, it's going to get back into the water. And Neil deGrasse Tyson says that in Cosmos Space-Time Odyssey, episode 12. Anyway, Here we go. They're seen more often due to higher levels of commercial jet traffic. That's their claim. So as I pointed out in my intro, though, if this is 1996 where they're first coming out, so let's say a 10-year span. Here's the total air traffic, 1.3. Here's 2002 at 2.6. That's double the traffic, right? Why don't you see double the trails? Only double the trails. And why didn't you see the trails then? And the only explanation I know is higher humidity or different engines. And like I said, those engines were put into service right around here. So there's a lot of debate that could go on there. And unfortunately, I haven't gotten that far. And then Wigington's like, even the commercial jets are, when they're flying, they're leaving this stuff. And that conflicts with Rosalind Peterson's 2007 presentation to the UN. She's like, no, it's these military jets. And what she did, which was cool, is she got from the FAA and her legislator actual FAA maps proving that the military were flying over there. Now, in the old days, in the late 60s, they were using barium as an anti-smoke agent for their engines. But they cut that out, and they would not come up in these levels. Okay, and Patrick Roddy has some great samples too. Okay, this is what the media tells you. This is the only possible plausible argument for saying, okay, this is why we're seeing more, and I'm not going to go into it. But basically, it's cleaner engines, need higher flight. They leave fewer contrails because they're more efficient, right? Yet, fewer soot particles is going to leave less contrails. So those two statements are contradictory. They're saying they're more efficient, they don't leave as much soot, yet they go higher where that band of humidity is supposed to be. And I didn't find that when I checked a lot of data. And from 42,000 feet up, it slams down to like 30 and then down to like 5. So as you get colder and colder, of course, there's more chance to have those persistent contrails. But it's just that it's nonsense to me. Okay, this is a very good article. When we share this, you can read this. But it's just saying they've been present in the atmosphere for 75 years. Serious aircraft produced can affect the local radiation balance. Estimated that less than 0.2% of the globe is contrail affected. Right? Well, why are we seeing them everywhere? Everywhere, right? Right? Here's more media, chemtrails debunked, man who tricked conspiracy theorists. Here's another one, EPA confronts chemtrails. And there's another EPA that just came out. I checked that out. They don't say anything different anymore. BBC jumped on board. They did a hit piece on these guys. They're farmers, and they sent an activist out there, and he said, oh, haven't you seen this study? Right? This study here that shows that 76 out of 77 scientists say this is bunk. All right, well, this is what I want to rip up here. This is one of my huge points here. These are the 4 people that wrote it. Mick West is a debunker. Ken Caldera, we know who that is. He's the world's #2 geoengineer. No conflict of interest there. Stephen Davis is his partner, and Christine Shear is a representative who is a contractor of of coal, the coal industry. Okay. Now, when you go to the study online, you see that there are only 9 questions. This is this huge study, and the first, I should actually go back to that. You can see the actual study. Here we go. Question 1 of 9. Have you in your work or personal life ever come across evidence that you think indicates the existence of a secret large-scale atmospheric spraying program? Yes or no? That's their first question to a bona fide scientist. And that scientist, more of them just said, well, I don't know what to, here you go. No. That's their claim. That became their title. 76 out of 77 don't believe in it. They show some fairly good examples, 2 or 3, of things that could be other things, and so on. All right, here is what I want to show, though. All right, one found barium in there, and I think he's on this call. I'll bet. Here we go, manganese. I'm not going to get into that. It should be noted that 39% said, I need more information. Your study sucks. Okay, your study is not scientific. I need more information. 37% agreed there's higher persistence. 39% of the soil survey respondents needed more info. 49% for the aerial photos wanted more info. So half of the scientists shown pictures needed more info and said, you know, here, yes or no, but. So this is terrible science. All right, there's Christine. She's Colin Steele. David Keith is Ken's buddy. We all know who David Keith is. He's paid by Bill Gates. He's the world's #1 geoengineer. Here we go. Carnegie. Who's this? Davis. Ah, he's Carnegie. Davis, he founded Near Zero. Near Zero is the organization who conducted the survey, right? No conflict of interest there. And then Stanford is Near Zero. Here's Caldera on their site. And here's Paulson Institute, which is funded by Gates. Kissinger, Bush is on there, a real elite crew there. Okay, so my point is just like this is everywhere in the media. If you Google this topic, this is what you find 80% of the time, and that bugs me. Okay, we should get into geoengineering here. No, we don't have time. All right, so let's move on. I know we're short on time. Here we go. We don't need to know that. We all know how it works. Those are the clubs pushing back. Why haven't I seen them before? Debunkers asked. You just never noticed. So here are 2 movies that I found in my own collections where these are actual persistent contrails. One in this movie. This is Yosemite. I found 1 set in that whole movie, and there's a lot of aerial photography. There's a 12-minute segment in this movie, Flight of the Navigator. No contrails. There's almost 18 minutes in Koyaanisqatsi, brilliant film. This shows the clouds, the time lapse, forming, reforming, not a single contrail, none. Okay, so there goes that argument. This, with a high bypass engine, can go down to 45. Some people say, I don't know. Anyway, so this is how to do it. If you want to find a persistent contrail, this is my apartment. There's a nice straight line that goes virtually due west and east. This is a regular aircraft contrail that's going to dissipate. It did. It took 2 minutes and 36 seconds, but it did dissipate. So if you stand there every day in a public park or wherever your X marks the spot is here, and you get your heading and you go to the flight tracker, you say, okay, here I am. Here's the plane at this elevation. Here's what kind of engines it has, high bypass or not. Here's who represents it. Here's its flight path going from and to. You compare another jet going through that same airspace, accounting for the wind direction and any variation in elevation, and you look up the contrail calculator here at Windy, right? And you just say, could there be a contrail there? And if it's in blue and green and so on, they'll highlight it for you. So I'm just saying, if you just have Windy and you have a phone or a camera and a flight tracker, you can now, for the first time, you can just say, hey, that's of concern, that is not. Okay. Directed energy weapons, I'm sure everybody's seen this, but this is from the GAO. Okay, so that's happening. I think a lot of people, they hear that and they put a tin hat on this issue. Oh, that's hooey. It's like, no, that's already here. And if you don't believe it, you want a credible source, you can go on archive and you can look up this book by Baumanns. Anyway, this is the theoretical model. This whole book is like 400 pages, 444 pages of directed energy weapons that are already developed. Okay, done. It exists. Rosalind Peterson, the best, in my opinion, God rest her soul, but she proved the trails, she proved the soil samples pretty convincingly. Wigington does the same thing. I think he's wrong about the bypass, but the nanotech, I'm sure, is real. Kristen Megan has a very convincing story. She worked for the Air Force and saw aluminum and barium on their manifest sheets. She brought it to her superior's attention. They said, you better get out of here. You better shut your mouth. So they transferred her, and she repeated the process. So twice she got booted out of the Air Force, basically, for finding evidence of what would be placed in the aircraft. And Michael Murphy, he died. Some believe he was targeted by he started mumbling to himself and he died. Jim Lee, everybody knows him, probably the chief. Patrick Roddy had to quit 2019 after the Paradise Fires. He ran out of money, and he was also, some believe, targeted. Madison Star Moon, this is good for people to know. When you go, you see she calls our authorities, and at length you can hear her bitch them out, and it's very entertaining. And but its utility is you can see firsthand what our authorities say to us. It's just contrails, just contrails. Would you leave me alone? Right? Deagle, I didn't check too much into him, but I've seen him before. Okay, and now here's where I'm just going to show you one video and I'm done. Okay, this is let's see which one.
Do you want sound, David? Because you're not getting sound.
You're not getting
Press
sound?
that.
That's okay. I don't need it.
Okay.
I don't need it, but I need to know where that is, and I think it's 41. Are we there? Anyway, does everybody know what a gravity wave is? Yeah, this is the right one. I'm gonna get, no, I'm sorry, I'm stymied again. I apologize. This link won't work directly. But anyway, if you look on the screen, you can see that they did a time lapse of this, and you can see the symmetry here is incredible. It's just, there's no mountains that I'm aware of that are miles long and they don't have any curves or holes. They're just these symmetrical waves that go and roll, and they're scary. They're scary. So this is where we get into the weather modification. I'm not gonna, right? But here's the directed energy weapons, the Paradise Fire, and so on. And that's pretty much it for me. Here's how it's made. I lived in Paradise, California for 7 years, and I know they had a severe fire that ranged from Chico up to just north of there. It was not Oroville, Magalia. And so people were trapped in the 80s, and they already had those fire mitigation plans already. They developed those years ago, yet people got stuck. So my conclusion is I agree with Nick Begich here. He just says, when you start to look at where do the elites want to take us, and that's a conspiracy. Is it a plan or a conspiracy? It depends on where you're sitting. If you're in the planning center having a chit-chat with these guys, it's just a plan. You're on the outside looking in, and you see it working against your interests, it's a conspiracy. These elites operate in their own self-interest. It just happens to not be ours. In fact, in many cases, it works against us on a fundamental level, which is why we do need to be engaged. When you start to think about where's the money and power collected in the world today, it's in the military, industrial, academic complex. It's those three working together where the big bucks are spent. Now, if you follow Begich, you go to HARP. You follow HARP, you go to Eastland. If you could follow Eastland, you get pretty good science. Goes back to the 80s. All right, I'm done.
Okay, well, thank you. I guess then it's time for questions and answers. And Charles has his hand up first, so we call on him.
Thanks, Scott, and folks in chat. I just put the instructions how to raise your hand. It's behind the heart-shaped React tab at your Zoom controls. You'll find the raise hand icon there. So you mentioned the wireless antenna aspect to this. Is the influence of the geoengineering and weather modification coming from a special category of antennae, like HARP, Doppler radar, or does the general 5G rollout on every other street corner also add to the synergy between the two threats to humanity?
That would be a good question for Virginia. She knows about this, and her son died in 2009, and so she's been tracking where the government houses their local smaller sites, as you mentioned. I would doubt that. Other than the ability of a smart meter, for instance, I think any telemetric device is capable of broadcasting a directed signal, at least if it's built to do so. but I'm sorry, this is not my area. But I know the large scale, absolutely, from a ship, the next rad, that's what Dane Wigington is all about. Alaska Skywatcher, you can find nice segments on him. Trouble with these claims, even Dane Wigington's, is like, okay, show us how it works. They always show us that it happened. Oh, look at the storm, it got steered. There's these big bursts of next rad towers, and they balloon out. It's like, well, that's what they do. You're seeing 15-minute increments of an expanding parabolic wave representative of EMF satellite waves. So that's what it's supposed to do. That doesn't prove anything. Now, if you see clouds being steered, if you see low pressure, high pressure flip-flop, like that video I just showed, those gravity waves, okay, now you got something. So the answer to your question, I believe, is absolutely. I don't understand the science well enough because I can't find it.
Okay. Quick follow-up. I think Susan Clark has talked about that on previous shows. She may know some stuff about that. A quick comment on the political aspect. You've seen 30 states introduce bills to ban geoengineering. A couple passed, Florida, Tennessee. There's a bill in Congress, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and then Zeldin and EPA conceded it exists and it's not a conspiracy theory. Any comment on what the states are doing versus the feds and the lack of interest in it from the Maha Commission?
I don't do politics well. I don't know. I'm a newbie in here. I'm just kind of the scout looking at the skies and doing research. I'm sorry, I can't help much, but my feeling is that they're not going to be interested unless there's pressure. So
that's a good answer. That's probably true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So thank you, Charles. And I think next was either Mark or Linda. I'm sorry, I didn't notice which. I guess Linda, you have the floor.
Yes. I used to travel very often between Baltimore and Athens, Greece. So close to more than 20 years ago, I have noticed that my plane going to Athens was higher, and 4 other planes running, flying parallel and leaving a foam like chemtrail behind them. Another day, close to that, I was at the center of Athens. It was a light rain, and I saw foam at the corner of the street. And I said, my God, what's that? They wash clothing and they put the foam of them on the street.
yes.
And then I continued driving to my home, which is like close to the north, next to the mountains. And there I saw in front of my condominium on the street the same type of foam. So I took in a glass this foam and I went to the special institute where I used to teach a master's degree program to students. And I said, please, I'm not going to tell you from where it comes, but examine in your best possibility what is inside this foam. And guess what? That was over 20 years ago. And it was aluminum, strontium, barium, and all those things that exist today in chemtrails. The only thing is that now they added to them chemtrails, nanoplastics and nanoparticles, and that is terrible. Supposedly from climate change, but they pollute the atmosphere more than anything else. In front of my balcony, almost daily, I see in Baltimore, 9th floor, I take pictures of those chemtrails because cannot be to make, they don't go parallel and then go vertical. That has to stop, absolutely. Is a crime against nature and against humanity and against everything. And I study closely that because those are not planes, commercial planes. They have barrels inside with all the chemicals that they send out. So really, we have to stop this crime. I think one state stopped the chemtrails. I don't remember which one recently. And Maha has to stop them. because does not make sense. It's only negative. And of course, if they go to the nature, the soil absorbs them, and the plants with the roots absorb all this terrible material that we eat later on. Okay, that's my point. Is one of the worst things that happens in our times. That's it, my question. And I have proof, pictures, everything you want.
Well, now I remember you from the other call. I feel you, and I've been a lot of overwing things myself. If you use this method and keep those pictures, and now you have a way to prove when, where, and what you're looking at. If you can say there's not enough humidity, this is an aberrant flight path. It's supposed to go to Baltimore to Miami. It's not. It's just some commercial plane. It's larger. It's KC-135. Now you've got something. Otherwise, it's just a claim blowing off the
Absolutely.
internet.
I have pictures almost every day. Yep,
Good.
all of them.
Okay, thank you, Linda. Mark, you were next, and then after that, Marvin Herndon had his hand, trying to raise his hand, so he'll be after you.
Thank you very much. A couple of questions for you, David. Very nice presentation, first of all. First, there are two proposed motivations that I've read about or heard about for this geoengineering, one being the more obvious weather control, and the other being actually poisoning the population. And I was wondering how much credibility you attach to either of those, or whether there might be, from your investigation, any other motivations. And the second question I have for you is, how can we do better than Dane Wigington? I've been following him for over a year, and he keeps saying every time we have to wake people up.
Yeah.
And I don't see people waking up any more than they were when I first started following him a year ago. And the level of apathy about it is stupendous. Any ideas about that? Thank you.
I do. Great questions. Number one, absolutely. Weather control, as I put in the document I produced last year, Time to Wake Up, unequivocally, there is weather control. And that comes from Newsweek, that comes from the Weather Wars, that comes from Dubai, that comes from I believe it was Shanghai Olympics, but I can't remember. So the 2012, the leader of Iran accused the U.S. of earthquakes. You can go to Jim Lee's site and find Operation Woodpecker. It goes on and on and on. I can't put this in it, but absolutely there is weather control. Whether it's cloud seeding that you can find out at NOAA's website that they publish, that is still legal in many states, no problem. Okay, poisoning you're referring to is found in several documentaries, one of which is Frankenskies, and they always reference the Tuskegee experiment, where they gas certain populations. And lithium in Washington is another case study. I can't verify it, but I have a timeline in my presentation of Will Thomas. He goes into that in his timeline. That's one of my links. You can look in there, and that will lead you to the nature of your question. Absolutely. As to question two, how do we remove our apathy? I believe you just have to be cooler than. You have to be cool. You have to give people a reason to want to be around you and hear your claim, and because you can't go out on the soapbox and say, hey, by the way, did you see that chemtrail right above you? Well, here's what it's made of, So it's just like somebody sees a picture on your wall. Oh, you've got high flight. I love that poem, right? It might lead to a conversation. And so that would be a good example. So I've found the courage is difficult to muster to even broach this subject, especially after COVID. So we need to grow some balls, basically, and just invite people with that courage. And it's hard.
I just want to follow up on one thing. What is the motivation of the Department of Defense or whoever is behind this in modifying the weather? What are they? they're doing it all the time. What are they hoping to
It's
accomplish?
endless. It's a defensive strategy, one of which is VTRPE. It's just saying, okay, we need to blanket this entire area because lasers can penetrate those areas unless there's cloud cover. We can also bounce EMF signals off of those to communicate with our satellites. They also form telemetric barriers that you can bounce waves off of, right? And you can maintain communication just like line of sight around the Earth. That's one of, I'm sure, thousands of uses for this type of aluminum. You know, as you know, I'm sure well aware, it spreads out and it forms that. So does barium, and it's piezoelectric. So if you can charge it and you can reflect these signals, you not only give the enemy nothing to fire at on your city, you also maintain from your planes, right? You maintain your comms, and that's in their science, absolutely.
It's
Okay,
defensive.
thank you. Thank you, Mark. I might add to that one of the motivations, I think, behind the Department of Defense and the others using this technology is to blackmail other countries into following the global American empire's wishes. You know, they'll say, we'll withhold rain from your country for, you know, a year if you don't do what we say, or we'll flood your cities with water. And they do it as a form of blackmail. Because you see, I noticed this at Codex meetings, how many different countries just follow the US's lead. And there's no reason to. I mean, even Cuba and Venezuela follow the US's delegation lead at Codex meetings. It's remarkable. Anyway, Dr. Herndon was next. And if you're still there.
I am still here.
You. Okay, please go ahead. You have the floor.
Well, there's really a lot to say. I'll try simply to be brief. First of all, there is a highly concerted effort, presumably by the CIA and other such organizations, to deceive the public. You mentioned one environmental research's paper that was published in the peer-reviewed scientific literature. That was manipulated by Mick West, who was allegedly a disinformation agent. Well, one of the people on your list of good people to get advice from served with Mick West.
Really?
And has become very, very well connected in the community, providing great amounts of information. But if you go to that presentation that was made on, what's his name? Del Bigtree, you'll see there was a lot of true things, but there were some false things. So I, along with three other colleagues, responded to that in a published peer-reviewed article where we cleared up some of the things that this individual had said that were simply not true. The way that disinformation people work is they give you a lot of good information and they mix in with that some deceitful information to deceive you. Now, getting on to another thing, the chemtrail problem, and I use the word chemtrails because there's been enough in the literature that people can relate to that without being influenced by what the CIA and others might say. This is a problem throughout the US, the European Union, the British Commonwealth nations, and perhaps other places in the world. Well, you have to ask the question, well, what is the legal basis or pseudo-legal basis? And one of the things that I discovered is, in fact, that pseudo-legal basis. In 1978, the UN put into force an international treaty, ostensibly to ban the use of environmental modification for hostile purposes. But that's a Trojan horse treaty. The only article that deals with the subject line is the first article, and it does not use the word shall, which is a commanding word. Instead, it uses will strive not to, or something like that. And then the rest of that in deceitful, carefully worded language obligates signatory nations to participate in peaceful global modification. There's no such thing. Well, it turns out that back in, I think it was 2016, there was a news article about particles that were scattered all over 7 properties in, I guess, Wisconsin. And so I was able to get some samples and to get pictures and to get information. And these little particles looked like pencil erasers. They were composed of plant debris mixed with some kind of an organic binder, mixed with coal fly ash, and mixed with salt. And these were scattered around. They had all the identities of what are called cryoconite, which are particles, natural particles of debris that fall on glaciers and then melt their way down. The real reason, the overbearing reason, now everybody gets something out of this, the military, the people with the financial, the control people, the disinformation people, there's something for everyone. But the main reason for this is to melt Arctic ice, to get at the resources under it, and to open a ship channel through the ice. Now, in a little bit after this treaty went into force, the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, got started, and they pushed the false narrative that carbon dioxide in the air was causing heating and that we were having global warming. And of course, the UN and a bunch of other people got a lot of money out of that and a lot of control. But that is not what's causing global warming. I've published many peer-reviewed scientific and medical papers, along with one of my colleagues who just retired as the medical director of the Key West, the Florida Public Health Service in Key West. And what we have discovered with compelling evidence is the main substance being put in the air is coal fly ash, the waste product of burning coal. Number one, it's cheap. Number two, it comes in just the right sizes. But most importantly, it reacts with water, even distilled water, to extract certain elements, as many as 38 elements in varying degrees, including aluminum, barium, and strontium. That's why those are found in rainwater, along with a lot of other elements. Now, what it does, putting these salty, if you would, elements into water, rainwater, makes the raindrops more electrically conducting. And of course, they become part of clouds in many instances. So you can move these conducting particles with electromagnetic waves. Now, this being a UN international treaty, this supersedes national laws as long as the nation involved does not block the application. As long as the State Department says, okay, it's fine, then they supersede all laws, including the EPA. And this is, and so there's a lot of benefits to be gained, if benefits. Now, you mentioned the being able to shine radar over a curved surface. That's just one of the many. But it also damages life. It damages health. It damages but the main thing that we have discovered, Mark Whiteside and I have discovered and published 4 or 5 papers recently in the scientific literature, is this coal fly ash is being lofted into the stratosphere. Now, in 1989, the UN bought into some research that a couple of guys got the Nobel Prize for, claiming that refrigerant gases, chlorofluorocarbons, were killing the stratospheric ozone and letting ultraviolet rays in and causing, for example, the ozone hole at the Antarctic.
Antarctic, yeah.
Well, since then, this ozone hole has gotten worse. There have been ozone holes reported in the Arctic as well as around the tropics. They misdiagnosed the problem. Now, we showed a lot of evidence that it's coal fly ash that destroys the stratospheric ozone. And if you want to make coal fly ash amenable for some commercial purpose, which many people do since it's a waste product, one of the easiest things to do is to treat it with ozone. And a lot of people have, and there's a lot of information. And I'm telling you, ozone does things to it, but as it does, it destroys the ozone. So this is what's causing, over the last 30 years or so, skin cancer. All three types of skin cancer rates have been increasing. The amount of ultraviolet coming into the surface of the earth has been increasing because we have been destroying the stratospheric ozone layer. So that's one of the real urgent harms. It's killing life. It used to be you could drive through the countryside in the summer for a few hours and your windshield would be covered with bugs. No longer. They're rare. The insect populations have been decimated. Mark Whiteside and I have published papers on the effects of coal fly ash in killing insects, birds, bats, causing COPD and lung cancer, neurodegenerative disease, cardiac problems. I mean, it's a broad spectrum way to harm humanity and to harm the environment. And these are all the fringe benefits of this program. Now, I've published, I have a website called nuclearplanet.com. And there you can find most of the peer-reviewed and published papers listed, and you can download copies of them. Now, with respect to what's happening with the UN, we published a paper about what the UN has been doing, and we filed a complaint with the International Criminal Court. Of course, you know that doesn't mean a lot, but this is the real story. And there's a lot of disinformation out there, and there are a lot of people out there that aren't well trained, that are riding the bandwagon. There's one woman, for example, that combined with Jim Lee and another old guy who was a disinformation person for the Canadian that you mentioned his name in 2002, wrote the book about chemtrails.
Carnicom?
No. That was before Carnicom. Anyway,
Eastland.
No.
Okay.
The one who was one of the first to publish about chemtrails, and he was attacked by a disinformation agent. Now, these disinformation agents do all they can to minimize me. I published 2 peer-reviewed and published papers in public health literature, and the disinformation people struck and lied to the editors and made assertions, and the editors retracted the papers without ever allowing me to have the opportunity to defend myself. I mean, these are bad people, and they know what they're doing. And these, in my view, are aiding and abetting crimes against humanity. And you'll see some of them. You'll see some of them presenting a pretty picture that they have, oh, this wonderful website with lots of information. But watch out, read carefully. And if you look on my website, you will find a paper that is our response to Dell Big Tree's program. And you should say, you should read that. I mean, the one thing, it's sometimes difficult to tell in science, for example, to tell something that is true, but it's very easy to find what is not true.
Dr. Herndon, your information is super important. What we might do though is stop here on your comment, give the other two people in line a chance to get their question in, if you don't mind, and then circle back to you. Oh, no, you should be a featured speaker as well, frankly, but why don't we be fair to Jennifer and Nikki, let them make a few comments, and then come back to you. And if you don't mind taking,
apologize for taking so long.
Frankly, this is better for you because they may say some things that trigger a response from you as well.
Please.
Okay, so thank you very much and forgive my interruption. Jennifer, if you'd like to take the floor.
My connection's unstable, so I hope I don't lose you. I have one comment and a couple questions. My comment on the political solution, this is going to absolutely have to be at the highest level, at the national level, the executive level, the EPA, something, not the state level, because I was just in Eastern Tennessee, and I know Tennessee has already passed legislation to ban geoengineering, and I saw the chemtrails all over my mom's property in the mountains of Eastern Tennessee. I don't know if they're targeting with this states that had the lowest vaccination rate to get these materials into the people, if that's part of the reason. I don't see them as much here in Ohio. I see them a lot in Tennessee, which is interesting because they've already passed the legislation. So that's my comment politically. My question is, how long have they been spraying the coal fly ash? How many years has this been going on? Is this just since COVID and the 5G rollout, or has it been going on longer than that? And what just happened in Jamaica? How did the whole eastern seaboard somehow not get a hurricane this year, and Jamaica got hit with the most massive? And were they informed? Did they allow it? What's in Jamaica that they want?
Well, since the coal fly ash has been being used routinely as the main substance for the chemtrails since the 1990s. Now, I can't really address those other issues, but I do know that in 1968, a very famous scientist wrote a chapter in a book on how to wreck the environment. He had served as an advisor to many military organizations and presidents about how to alter the environment. And he predicted all of these things, and including modifying somebody's weather, so because it's hard to detect. It can be done surreptitiously. But in the 50 some years that have elapsed, what the technology has been greatly advanced so that they can alter the weather, they can change the jet streams, they can induce earthquakes. It's a terrible, terrible thing to do to humanity. And with respect to what you said about the states having no power, the governments, the federal governments have no power as long as they either are unwilling or they do not know what is being done through this international treaty, this Trojan horse. And so an international treaty, unless a nation blocks it, it has overriding authority on just about every bit of legislation, every bit of rules.
Very true. David, did you have a
Jamaica didn't
response
have the
to the
right.
question? Oh, Nick, I'm sorry, Jennifer, 1 minute.
Okay.
Let's let David weigh in if he needs to or wants to.
No, that's okay. I think that Herndon covered it. It's deeper than I can possibly. I don't think you will ever get an answer. You can have a connection to a good answer on that. But again, one thing, I don't subscribe fully to Jim Lee's points, but one point he does make, it's just like, hey, where's your proof? Like we all see this. Like I told you, I spent 4 years looking up at the sky outside and categorizing. I have terabytes of footage. Which one's a trail, which one's not. But if I don't show that to anybody, who matters? A legislator. I'm just talking. So you guys know the theory, you know who's doing it, you know why they're doing it, but you need to plug that into who's going to listen, who's going to act on it, right? Otherwise, we're just feeling good about ourselves that we know. Okay? That's all I have to say there.
Jennifer, did you have a follow-on question to that?
Yeah, about Jamaica. So basically, because they're not a UN nation, they did not have the right to refuse this. Is that right?
I'm sorry, I'm not aware of this, so.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either, but okay, so Nikki, I think you're next up. And you had a question?
It was a comment.
Or a comment? Sure, go ahead,
Yeah.
please.
So someone had asked, why they do this or who's doing it or what it's being done for. It's generally done for commercial and military purposes. So for commercial purposes, because there's so many industries directly connected to agriculture, like warfare especially, military, communications, transportation, agriculture, controlling weather around regions allows you to control local, regional, and even global economies. So that's one of the things. And in the document, Weather as a Force Multiplier, Owning the Weather in 2025, which is this year, of course, they can do it on a very broad system, but they can also do it in a very localized system. They can modify weather in an area as small as a single community, which we see happening a lot more today than we ever did before. But in 1996, when they wrote the document, Weather as a Force Multiplier, Owning the Weather in 2025, they had a follow-up to that was it was from 1998, and it's called Foundations 2025. And within that didn't just include weather, that included future telecom for 2025 and what we call today the IoT, or the Internet of Things, including the Internet of Nano Things and Bio Things, where you can observe people from everything from the low Earth orbiting, or LEO satellites, to the upper elevation satellites, to everything down on the ground, the GWEN networks, the ground wave emergency network systems, Doppler and XRAD. It all works collectively, even along cabling today. So they want to be able, in the document, observe people, collect information, and perpetually surveil them. And with geoengineering, biologically, not just from people who took the mRNA vaccine that has different whole scope of horrible nanomaterials, as y'all probably know, including the SANs, those self-assembling nanomaterials. They want to be able to manipulate us biologically, physically, informationally, and psychologically. So geoengineering is the very foundation for the control of societies and the Great Reset. So I hope that answers the question for the fellow who added why, or who asked why. Sorry, I can't find who it was, so I apologize.
That's okay. I'm sure they know who they are. And thank you for that, Nikki. Anything else to follow on from that? Okay, Charles, you're next.
Thanks. And in chat, I put today's invitation link that I hope folks can click to In this case, scroll down to our links to email your congresspeople on our geoengineering campaign, which I will show briefly on screen. And if you scroll down on the invitation, you'll get down to our campaigns there at the bottom. And if you do click that, you will see on our campaign page the geoengineering campaign up top. It was edited by a lot of friends. Jim Lee, Susan Clark, Jolie Diane, Renette Senham, others have put their input into it. So it's a pretty good email to Congress critters. So please send that. Also, while you're at that page, do send that third campaign down the list on wireless radiation. As I mentioned at the intro, there hasn't been a catastrophe like the pandemic that made people care about vaccine tyranny. There hasn't been a similar catastrophe to make people care about wireless radiation dangers, or for that matter, geoengineering and weather modification dangers. But this is our email to send. We're most actively working this issue. We can't work them all with the same intensity. Weekly, we're having meetings. I have 2 meetings later today, including with Scott McCullough, the top attorney, on this issue, trying to find allies in Congress to care about this. They are going to put 5G small cell antennas on every other street pole across the country. And if it helps the larger HARP system manipulate the weather, they'll do it. But they certainly will use it to control our behavior and use the social credit score, and it will injure us physically in the process. So do please join us on that campaign. And I'll stop share and thank David for his fantastic presentation. And Scott, any last words?
Yeah, absolutely. One thing, Susan isn't able to use her audio, and she wanted us to please tell Jennifer Mansler that they are actually working on, and NHF is too, of course, on state legislation. Susan says, the Tennessee, Florida, and Louisiana state bills are badly written because the authors did not inquire first of those of us who have been writing this type of wording for years, many years. So she just wanted that message transmitted to Jennifer and I guess the rest of the group. And then as for the last words, I want to remind people that the National Health Federation, which is over 70 years old, will be celebrating its 71st anniversary event in the Dallas-Fort Worth area on April 23rd through the 25th of 2026. And you'll get more information on this, especially if you're signed on to our email list, which you are, or you wouldn't be on this call. And we hope to see all of you there. And there will almost certainly be a topic, probably moderated by our NHF lobbyist, Charles Froman himself, on this very issue of geoengineering. So we'll see how that all goes. Anyway, thank you all. I hope if you aren't members of the National Health Federation, you become members. Very easy, go to www.thenhf.com and become a member. And we look forward to having you participate in our next monthly meeting as well. Thank you. Charles, anything?
Maybe we'll invite Mr. Byrd to tell folks how they can reach him.
Yeah, I wanted to say just something briefly. Since COVID hit me pretty hard because the first time I have an 80% response rate from my cold call. Like if I call an author and I say, hey, I want to use your work, 80% of the time I can get them to call. But my own family, my own friends, during COVID, when I started introducing some of this material, they didn't even raise a peep. Facebook messes things up. Google searches are tainted. Okay, so I just want you to know that I have developed works, like you saw, Longmont could care less if you get cancer. I've produced works to communicate with people. It's just saying, oh, that's not a fact, that's not a fact. Here's 250 links presented And what you said, Nikki, is right on, right? But in order to articulate this much information, and connect it to the people who you can't connect to on this issue and get it up to the legislature, you need help. I'm just saying, if anybody wants tools and how to do that, I'm not a coach in this, but I have produced works that are devised, they're designed to do just that. This vast repository of information and the tendrils therein in order to connect people who are unfamiliar with this and put the right top hat on it and not a tinfoil hat, right? So I'm just saying I specialize that. If you want that, you can email me at, I put this in here, it's dvdbyrd@proton.me. And I'll hook you up with that. And I think you'll be impressed.
Thank you. Thank you for that, David. Charles, do you have any final stuff?
No, the Rumble recording, we'll have it up by next week. So please do make National Health Federation's Rumble channel one of your favorites over there. Obviously, we don't put too much of what we do on YouTube. Getting censored and dumped is just not worth the hassle. But maybe one day we'll revisit that media channel. Join us next week, next month, third Friday every month. We'll return to the FDA guidance threats on the natural healing that we like to access, whether it's compounded by a pharmacist or a homeopath. So that's the December, and we're booked January and continually booking. So please make us a home for you every month.
Thank you, everyone. We'll say goodbye now. We've kind of gone over our time, but it's been very interesting. And thank you to Dr. Herndon for chiming in on this. Really appreciate your making an appearance. And Nikki Florio, thank you for your input as well. Actually, thank everyone for their input. All right, we'll see you next time. Thank you, everyone. I'll say goodbye. Bye.
Thanks all.